First and foremost, I definitely want to thank you for taking out your time to stop by on the platform and talk about some of the amazing work that you've been doing. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Taye. As I was, it was sort of out of the blue, this invitation. I don't know how you even ran across me, but I'm happy to do it. I'd like to come visit you in Madagascar. I don't know how long you'll be there. I've never been, but it sounds great. And I'd like to hear for a minute at least what you're doing there and a little bit about you and the platform. I looked at some of the sessions you had done, and and just got a little bit of just of a feeling for it. But I would love to hear you talk about it for a minute before we get started, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. So, I'm a world traveler. I've been to about 70 different countries. I've been to about 20 African countries. So right now, I'm kind of looking for a place to live. I've been in Africa the last year. I've been in Madagascar like the last 3 months. It's a very beautiful place. Beautiful people, beautiful culture. They have like a lot of diverse wildlife. Great food. The weather is nice. Yeah, so I'm just enjoying it. But I'm from the States. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio.
I can tell from the accent.
Oh wow. Okay, okay. Yeah. So, okay, now I can ask you for the viewers who may not recognize you. Let them know who you are, definitely where you from, and also what do you do.
Okay. So my name is Tim Gilman Shefchik. I am born in the U.S. I was born in Connecticut. I grew up in Colorado. Most of my adult life has been spent in New York, specifically Red Hook, Brooklyn. Currently, I am based in Prague, where my wife's family is from, and we moved back here from Red Hook this summer. And it is our intent to stay here for a while. And I am going to be back and forth to New York a bit. I teach at NYU in the business school, teaching a social impact within the social impact program, which is experiential learning and sort of a writing and research class for the business students to see how their aspirations, their studies, their sort of view of the world can fit into a larger framework of benefits, especially to those who've been historically disenfranchised or sort of left out of the let's say some of the positive aspects of the capitalist system that's now sort of all over the planet. And the idea is that looking at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, there's a framework for trying to reach different social issues that are inhibiting different people's possibilities, whether they're human or non-human, but like ways that we're being impacted by this kind of like global capitalist system that we're living in. So that's one aspect of what I do, which is some of my teaching work. I am primarily consider myself a visual artist. I have I never studied art formally. My wife did, however, she went to the oldest art schools in Europe, and so did 7 years of study there. And I sort of followed along with her as her creative partner. We made and exhibited art, curated, wrote about art for many different international venues, including the Irish Museum of Modern Art and the Kunsthalle in Basel in Switzerland, and just all over the place. Lots and lots in New York, around the U.S., and really like very much studio art, making paintings, sculptures, installations, and very much object-based art, conceptually informed, but materially driven. I then decided to go back to school, and I got a PhD in applied philosophy at a school called the European Graduate School, which is a highly unconventional school. It doesn't have any administration or any fixed faculty. It doesn't have any property. Like there's no library, there's no campus. So it operates. It was operating at the time that I was there out of a ski resort in Switzerland during the summer. So it's like there's a lot of empty space there. And they would bring in, on the basis of reputation and requests from the students, the greatest philosophers, living philosophers, theoreticians, practitioners of our time. And you would study directly with them. So the people who know the world of philosophy, theory, and criticism will recognize some of the names like Jacques Derrida, Alain Badiou, Giorgio Agamben, Judith Butler, just some of these, Slavoj Žižek, some of the big names of contemporary philosophy, and they're our teachers. So you sit in a small room with them, you hear about their ideas, you share your ideas, and then you go away and you write a book, which I did, and it changed my practice. Fundamentally, changed my practice from being a studio artist to being what I call an institutional sculptor. And that's somebody who engages with institutions of various kinds in order to make them more reflexive of the needs of our time and of the needs of our society and our world, because our institutions as they exist today are failing us in many different capacities, in many different places of need. We are seeing the shortcomings of our systems and the institutions, which are like the collective efforts to manifest our like human needs. And so they need to have, in my opinion, and what I'm studying and writing about is the way that they need to change in order to be more responsive to what it is that our world has become, and what it is that the world that we have crafted, and then the natural world that we are essentially in conflict with. So just this idea of me being on this, like this little screen that's taking me between here and Madagascar, allowing me to meet somebody I've never met before, to have this conversation to I don't know who, is an extremely new, evolved means of communication and interaction. However, we are doing it within societies that are in many respects not as reflexive of all of these tremendous changes that our technology has given us. And also, it's having an incredible impact on our natural environment that we are all dependent upon to actually exist and go forward and continue to, innovate our technology, improve our technology, bring human interaction together, and also to recognize some of these global problems that we are causing, or that are being, sort of a feedback loop from our activities, that are being exacerbated and could be mitigated or could be limited. So if I were to characterize what I do, I said it's an art practice, but it's very much in the practical world. So the jobs that I have, the employment that I have, the pursuits that I have are all in the name of engaging with our institutions, different types of institutions, in any way that I can, to try to come up with new ways of adapting to our current situations of various different kinds. So that's, in a nutshell, what I call institutional sculpture, what I've taken on as my creative practice. And it plays out in different ways in different aspects of my life, and hopefully has some impact and interaction with other people's lives.
Wow. Okay. Okay. I really appreciate you sharing that. You shared a lot of information, and I'm still processing it, but it sounds very interesting. And I can ask you, from your experience, um, you talk about global perspective and global problems. Is this an easy concept or a difficult concept for your students to understand? I mean, being that, I'm assuming that a lot of them may be young, a lot of them may have never been outside of America.
It's true. They're freshmen, their first year, so they're generally speaking 18 or 19 years old. A huge number, just because of the nature of NYU, are international students. So they've come to New York to study, and it's in the business school, so that they have a global reputation for working within the investment world. It's a very big Wall Street feeder school. So a lot of these kids are very focused on getting into the financial system, being very financially successful, whether it's for, to take back home to their country where they come from, or to help many are children of immigrants. So to sort of like solidify their family standing in this country or their own country. Many of them do come from, a large percentage come from very privileged situations. So they would have some perspective, international perspective, not always, not in every case, but I don't think that they feel like a big barrier to going to other places, being in other places around the world, but they don't necessarily view themselves as either being subject to or responsible for the impact that their lives and their lifestyle, or our lives and our lifestyle in the United States, has. So I like to try to have them think about what an incredibly privileged situation we operate under, just as people who can walk into the building at NYU, right? It's like, compare that to a human being somewhere else on the planet, what sorts of expectations and conditions they have that they count on a daily basis, as opposed to what we, as people studying and working inside of NYU, which is this incredible, like it's a financial and global machine or institution that provides, protects, and holds up tremendous privilege and also tremendous opportunity. And to say, look, with this tremendous privilege and this tremendous opportunity, we should think about what our responsibility is, or what our opportunities for extending what we have as a resource for others. So yes, I think that they can have a limited worldview, and they are young. But I think that the advantage is working with young people who may have been told things are a certain way, but may be still very open to seeing things in a different way. So I think they're a good group to work with. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Now I can ask you for yourself, like, when did you develop this passion and this drive and this concept?
Well, I grew up. My father is a doctor. He worked at the Children's Hospital in Denver, where I grew up, and so his work, while very lucrative, was basically about saving children's lives. And he sort of gravitated towards the most sick. He ran the burn ward. He ran the neonatal or intensive care unit for children, and on a daily basis, he was seeing sort of the worst situations that children in our country could find themselves in. And so I heard about that on a daily basis. When he would come home from work, he would look around the table. We were all fine, so he wasn't, worried about us. And my mother was an activist, sort of like deeply seated in her was a need to engage in civic society in a manner that was to, again, highlight the disenfranchised, those without access to power, or those with access to power, to sort of mitigate the damage that they were doing. So she was a big gun activist. She was very much for voting rights. She taught long-term inside of the system of incarceration to give people high school equivalents like GEDs. And she had all of us, my siblings and I, volunteering our time to work in different charitable organizations of our choice. But it was something that we did. It was a sort of a service that we did from our youngest age. And I think that between the combination of the two, there was like a very practical perspective, and that we did very well because my father was a doctor. And then there was a very caring and engaged perspective from my mother, to always have a sensibility of there being greater need than what we experienced, and a sense of, again, like, if not obligation, of inclination to actually trying to serve those needs. So I think that came with me as I grew up, and has, to a larger and larger degree, driven my employment and my energy and my sort of my study of the world and my engagement with the world.
Oh wow, that's really amazing. That's a blessing, to have those seeds and be planted at an early age, but also be exposed to have that, to be able to see that.
Yeah.
Let me see. Go ahead.
It's not connected to religion, and it's not connected to any other sort of formal institution or organization. So it's a kind of a free. My mother is a practicing Catholic, and she brought us up within the Catholic Church. But all of us broke away from any kind of formalized structured religion and sort of found our own way, but held on to that sense of ethical and moral behavior and engagement in the world. So my siblings are all to some degree engaged in service as a career. So I think that penetrated to us without the framework of something formal like religion.
Wow. Okay. Okay. I appreciate you sharing that as well. Now, can I ask you? You had mentioned books. You have books.
I'm calling in from the Center for Contemporary Art, NSU, in Prague, and it's a place that I've started working since I've landed in Prague, and so this is their library, and that's where I'm sitting right now, and mostly it's art library, so it's a lot of catalogs. It has a preponderance of Czech artists, so like locally concerned. But there's, this, I would say that I would know some of these people whose work are in these books behind me, but this is not my library. This is
Oh, okay.
it's nice to be surrounded by the books, and
Hmm.
be able to pull things off the shelf, but it's not my own personal library. My own personal library is a bit different than this.
Oh, okay. No, well, I was asking, like, have you authored books, or even have you thought about doing maybe a documentary about the work and the research and the amazing things that you have done?
Well, yes. So I have my doctoral dissertation was turned into a book under the university press, and it was called The Academy of Forgetting, and in which I was sort of coming up with the idea for an institution of higher learning that was sort of a counter or anti-institution to what typical universities or colleges are. And that book was then republished under a different title with an addition to it, about my actual creative practice that I developed after having finished work. So that was called Curating Organizational Memory, and that book was republished about, I think, about 3 years ago. And then before, during, and after, I continue to write and publish a fair amount. I was a journalist for a long time, and I wrote for a lot of magazines and newspapers, and then started to specialize more into art criticism and wrote very regularly for a couple of art magazines, and then started to do more like artist catalog texts, like longer pieces. And then when I did do my PhD, I started to focus on academic publishing. And I would say that each one of those forms of writing, or sort of like avenues for writing, have their strengths and their limitations. So what I'm really thinking about and looking for right now is a new venue or a new manifestation of the writing, that I will continue to do. I don't think that it's any of the things that I've done so far. So books in the academic press or academic journals, or popular press, magazines and newspapers, or artist catalogs, like sort of limited publications. I don't think any of them is the form that I'll be going for in the future, but I can't say for sure. I don't have anything concrete or specific that I've committed to yet, but I'm ready to commit to some kind of new form of publishing.
Wow. Okay. Okay. I definitely look forward to that. Now I can ask you about some of the work you've done in the museums and the galleries. You kind of touched on it, but from
Yeah,
looking at your profile, you worked with the Irish Museum, the Brooklyn Museum. You're doing some stuff in Prague. You did some stuff in Times Square. If you could just talk about that experience a little bit.
sure. So one of the things that my wife and I did, and we were making our work together, as I said, for almost 20 years, was we did a lot of artist residencies. And so you go to a place and you work on, your the art that you're making there is often in relation to the place. And so, for example, with the Irish Museum, we lived on the grounds of the museum. We made the work there. It was actually in response to the museum as an organization, as an institution. Then we exhibited our work there. And after that, we actually had additional exhibitions they invited us to. So we kind of established a relationship to the country because it was the national museum, but then also to that institution in particular. And I think that was a really positive experience because they put you in the living inside of the museum with a lot of other artists. And so you become kind of a family. And we still have very good relations with other people who were there with us at the time. And then we did other residencies like that. One in Switzerland, one in Norway, and in New York City. And it was really positive. You have an engagement, with the people that are around you and an exhibition, and you make work, and it changes your work to do it based on the sort of Genius Loci, like the spirit of the place. So there's that. And then with places like the Brooklyn Museum, just as an exhibiting artist, like making work and putting it up in the museum. And with Times Square, I was the artistic director of a for-profit museum that we opened there that was called Gulliver's Gate. And that to me was really an example of this institutional sculpture. So it was a museum, like legally through permitting and zoning, it was classified as a museum. The people who owned it and invested in it wanted it to be a tourist destination. And we settled on this idea of a cultural attraction, which means basically that it's something that is about or involved in the culture, but is as popular as possible. You get as many people to come as possible. So unlike a museum, which has a certain level of intimidation, to people, that not everybody feels comfortable there, not everybody feels like it's for them, we were trying to make it have the broadest popular appeal. And having it in Times Square, crossroads of the world, you end up with a huge population that comes through. But where I differed from the people who founded this organization and asked me to be the artistic director was that they really were thinking about it in a way that was so hyper commercialized that they alienated the local population. No New Yorkers wanted to go because they made it look like a tourist trap. And I actually left the organization the day after it opened because of irreconcilable differences between myself and basically the investors or the owners of the organization. So I opened the exhibit. I was extremely proud of it. It was extremely successful. We had global news presentations on the opening. I think it was 1 billion impressions that were made because we had like 700 news outlets that covered us from all over the globe, because it was in Times Square and it was a miniature world. And the miniatures that were representing different parts of the world were made in those parts of the world. So we had models being fabricated that we were discussing with them and ordering it from from 4 different continents. And those model makers came and installed it in Times Square, and we were live streaming the entire production process. So we had a camera running all the time from Russia, and another one from Argentina, and another one from Montreal, and another one from basically anywhere we were making the models, we were showing the making of the models and intercommunicating between the model makers, and then brought them into New York to install it. And so when we opened it, it really was a representation of many different cultures. I say we had 600 collaborators on the project because the number of model makers in each country that had a hand in the making of these displays and got to, in conversation with us, choose what was going to be shown. And then we designed the experience so that people who came from wherever they came in the world and saw it felt like they could identify with it from their own culture, but also from a sort of commonality of human culture. And in the miniature, everybody has a response to miniatures because it gives you this opportunity to see things like a child, because when you're a child, you get to play with toys, you get to pick things up and move them around like you're, sort of like some higher being, because you're small, you have no power in the world, so you have your toys which you have power over. So it's like this kind of metaphoric relationship to the planet, or to the world that you make in your bedroom, that people feel that connection again when they're seeing things in miniature. And so we tried to really play that up, that it was for people of all ages. It was a little bit like The Simpsons. When you watch The Simpsons with a kid, the kid laughs at one joke, you laugh at a different joke that's happening at the same time. So it was a little bit like that when people went to see this miniature world, an adult was seeing something different than a kid in the same display. So we tried to like have it play at different levels of meaning, different levels of impact for different people. So those were my various different kinds of interactions with museums. I also curated a lot of exhibitions, exhibited in a lot of different places, did talks, and took a lot of my students from non-artistic backgrounds and non-artistic studies into museums, and even started a program through the business school at NYU to engage students in the thinking that goes into art as a way of rethinking their relationship to business or to whatever practice they were going to get into. So I've had a lot of interactions with formal art institutions, like museums.
Wow. I appreciate you breaking that down, because I think a lot of times, I guess you would call them the viewers, they take for granted the work and the amount of thought and money and time that it takes to create, like you say, an exhibit.
Yeah.
We just might buy our ticket, we walk in the museum. We might spend an hour in a museum or some couple minutes looking at a display, but like you say, 600 people involved, and you got cameras and art coming from all over the world just to give a person that experience. And not to mention, like you're saying, creating something that can appeal to a child and an adult. Because, when I was younger, I didn't have the appreciation for museums that I do now. So I really, really understand what you were saying.
Well, sometimes there are museums that are deliberately working very hard to engage you as a child. Unfortunately, many of those museums don't necessarily engage the adult in the room, So if you go to a children's museum, you're kind of like brought down to the level of your child, and you can see how happy they are, but it's not necessarily informing or engaging you in the same way. And so with Gulliver's Gate, the goal was to engage people, where they came, where they were at, so that this platform, it was a very significant museum. It was a $40 million budget that we spent in 18 months. So we really went all out on the technology and the sort of immersive nature of the experience. So, for example, if you were visiting and you wanted to, you could step into a 3D scanner. So it was like a human-sized scanner. You walk in, we would scan you from all sides, and then could 3D print you in full color, recognizably, anywhere from this size up to this size. And you could be placed into the model as what we called a model citizen, so sort of a play on words. And that would be a way for you to sort of like say where you wanted to be, how you fit into this world, to give those people a feeling of actual physical engagement with this miniature world. So people would come and they would have their whole family scan, and then the family could be together in whatever place they decided they wanted to be. Like, oh, we love Venice, so we'll be placed in Venice. Or, oh, I'm from Beijing, so I want to be placed in Beijing. And so there was that level of engagement that people can then relate to one another. Aspirationally, that they want to go somewhere, that they want to do something, or that things are, in a sort of a playful, childish way, they are what you want them to be, at least to some degree.
Yeah, yes indeed, yes indeed. Like I say, museums are some of my favorite places now. When I travel all around the world, that's definitely on my to-do list, and it's like life changing. Some museums, because you find some really, really cool information, and then like you find things that are interactive, and you find interesting things that you may have not have usually been interested in, and it could just change you when you walk out that door. So I really appreciate your work. So. Mm-hmm. So I want to thank you. We 30 minutes in. We made the mark. I really appreciate the work that you are doing. Again, it's been an honor to speak with you, and I definitely look forward to the work that you have coming in the future.
Yeah, and thank you for doing what you're doing, Taye. It's inspiring to see somebody get such a wide range of people on, and I applaud your efforts. So thank you for getting in touch.
All right. Thank you so much.